Security controls. This is what Salesforce's strongest selling point. They always talk about their securities around their Salesforce orgs, as well as within their own instances. So there's a few things that you can kind of keep in mind. We already talked about profiles and roles before, so we'll pass on those stuff and go into password policies, which is the policy you can kind of set around passwords for your users. Network settings. That means you can restrict where the users log in from based on their IP addresses. Sharing settings. So this is where we can set an object to be either private, read-only, or public. And lastly, permission sets. So think of permission sets as like giving specific users an extra set of permissions. You could be thinking, don't we do that with profiles? Yes, but permission sets is kind of, let's say we need people to export a report, and we want to only give that access to the Western sales rep and the Eastern sales rep only. So the North and South don't have that access. So in that case, rather than creating them a own profile, because we still want them to have the same access level as all the other sales rep, and that's what profile will handle, we'll create a permission set to give them export access, and we'll assign that to the two users. Alright, so let's go back to our Salesforce sandbox, and we'll kind of walk through the fours we just kind of discussed. So back to our sandbox, again, we're under setup. In the quick find, you're going to type in password policies. And you click on password policies here, and this is a password policy, so you're setting it for all your users. If you remember this, when you're setting up a user, there was a section like that. So you can set it individually as well. So if you have remote workers or you have contract workers, you can kind of just set them a password policy, or you can do it for the whole company. So pretty straightforward stuff. You're asking, when does the password expire? How many times can you reuse a password? How big or how long can the password be? What is the formula around the password? Can it just be alphanumeric, or does it have to be uppercase, lowercase, and so on and so on? And lockout effective. So what that means is, let's say you're inactive with the Salesforce org for 15 minutes, it's gonna lock you out. Or even the number of attempts. After 10 attempts, your password is going to become locked. So maybe 10 is too high. Let's put that to like 3, which is a little bit more secure. And 90 days is good. And we're going to change the length to 12 because we want it to be very secure, because we're dealing with some, especially if you're dealing with the government and stuff like that, they would want something like a long password and to be like a mixture of budgeting. So we got uppercase, lowercase, and number. So we have a pretty strong password up here. So once you play around with those settings, if you forgot your password or your account is locked, you can kind of change the message that's displayed there, or you can push them to a different link. We don't really need to focus so much on that, so I'm just gonna skip that and press save. And the next one is network policies. So actually, if you type in network, the only thing you're going to get is network access, and that's where we're going to go. We call it network settings, but where you set it up is network access. So if you click on new, so what you're doing here is you're restricting the IP addresses a user can log in from. So let's say you got remote workers, or if you have remote workers, you only want them to log in from specific places. You don't want them logging in from everywhere. Or your office employees, you only want them logging from your office. You don't want them logging in when they're at their house, for them to be able to access your information and show someone. So that's the reason you would set up a security access around their network. So you can enter your starting IP range. So I'm gonna put, like the one that's there, which should be mine, 200, or this is the one I kind of made up, so I'm gonna enter that just to show you guys how it works. Just enter your IP address. If you're wondering what the IP address is, you can always just Google my IP address. I'm not gonna Google it because obviously I want my IP address to be secure. And here you always want to start a description. The reason for that is so you know whose IP address this is. Let's say you got 20 IP addresses without a description. and you come back and you need to remove one, it's going to be so complicated to find the one that you need to remove. So it's always good to add a description around it. So what I usually do is I just put the person's name and IP. So in this case, it's my IP. I save it, and if there's 20 here, I can come back, and if you need to remove it, I know this is the one I need to remove. I'm actually going to remove this. The reason for that is, obviously, I don't want to be restricted with the IP. I just want it open right now, especially because we don't have any data in here. So I'm just going to remove that. Perfect. Alright, the next one is sharing settings. Now, you'll probably hear the term org-wide default. So this is what they're talking about when you hear the term org-wide default. It's pretty much your organization's security settings. Click on that. Just waiting for it to load quickly. There we go. So at a default, any Salesforce org, everything is open. Account is public read-write, so that means anyone can go in and read and write in the account, which means not just the account owner, but if you own an account, I can come in and edit that information. Some companies don't really care about that, whereas most companies usually do. They want to restrict who owns access. So you can always come in here, press edit, and for example, an account, you can give them just public read-only. So that means if I'm the owner of a record, you can see that record and the information on it, but you won't be able to edit or delete anything. Private is when, if I own a record, you can't have access to that record at all. The only people that will have access to it is myself or my manager, who is higher up on the role hierarchy. So this is where the role hierarchy can come into play. Another thing you see is called controlled by parent. And what that means is the security setting around this child objects are controlled by the parent. So if you look at contact, the parent is account, because usually accounts is what contacts are related to. So we're just gonna look at contact, which is controlled by parent. So it's gonna look at the account security setting and be like, okay, I'm gonna be public read and write only as well. So we're gonna leave the organization-wide settings as it is, but you're more than welcome to kind of play around and see what sort of effects that it takes place. And the last thing is permission sets. These are always fun. Type in again permission sets and load. There we go. So of course, Salesforce has one default one in there. We can always create one by coming here. We click on new. Now we give it a name, of course, an API. And the API names always autofills. So I'm just gonna type in this is test perm set. So if you notice here, the API name, it cannot have space. So what it does when there are space between words, it just fills in a underscore. You can always just add a description, which is always good. And the reason for that is, let's say you work in a company for 2 years, you create all sorts of things, and you decide to resign, and a new admin takes over your position. They need to know what you did. So that's what the description is always important. And then it's asking which license is this permission set related to. We usually want to leave it at none unless we're really specific with their permission set. Click on save. And what you do is first you select the type of permission that you're kind of working with. So if you click on system permission and click on edit, of course, you can decide which permission you want to give this person. So maybe you want to give them access to, let's see, create Apex classes and triggers. And what Apex class and triggers are the programming code in Salesforce. If you scroll all the way down to something that we might be more familiar with, is here we go. Edit fields that are read-only because of the page layouts field security. So you can click on the ones that is relevant to you. Click save. Now keep in mind, we edited the permission set, but we haven't said which users have this permission. That's where you click on manage assignments, add assignments, and you'll be able to select the user. So I can add myself and our John Smith to it, assign, press done. So now these two users who might not always have that permission has that permission compared to the people that have the same profile as them. So that's what permission set is. It gives them that extra little permission without having to create so many different profiles for individual employees.
Learn with Whizlabs. Success, certified.